So I mentioned, there have been, a small but growing number of Israelis who are starting to speak out morally against the forced starvation of the Palestinians. This one caught my attention because what did we see in Russell's Jerusalem Day report? The purple-shirted Israelis were the ones who protected
Right.
Arabs from the maniacs who would throw things and kick and spit and punch them. So here's one. Yonah Rosman refused enlistment to the Israeli army yesterday in protest of the ongoing genocide and was sentenced to 30 days in military prison. The state of Israel is committing a genocide and we must resist, she said.
Show up at the draft office and declare that I refuse to serve in an army that's committing genocide, and for that I will probably be sent to military jail.
In Haifa, police arrested the activist during a solidarity protest with Yonah Rosman. So there were people in Haifa who came out and protested against her imprisonment for refusing enlistment. And here they are. Here they are. Here are the cops clashing with the protesters. Oh, boy. So like I said, you have a lot of these protests in response to the planned escalation, which they see as their final chance to get these hostages out. As Max Blumenthal tweets out, Israel's final solution is underway. Trump and Congress have signed off on it, and the EU is standing by. I want to go to one more piece of video that I saw just before we came on, so I'm going to have to screen share this. But here is a Jewish protester in Tel Aviv. Israel is doing now a Holocaust in Gaza worse than the German Nazis did in 1942 to the Jews. So this was a pretty powerful piece of video from one of the Tel Aviv protesters. So let's take a look at this right here.
I'm calling the world to help us from outside, because Israel is doing now a Holocaust in the Gaza Strip, worse than the German Nazis did in 1942 to the Jews. And I hope that this time the world will intervene, boycott Israel, and cause Israel to withdraw from the Gaza Strip and stop the massacre and the Holocaust that we are doing. I apologize as a Jew, as a citizen, of what Israel is doing now against the Gaza Strip. My name is Amram Zahavi. I am Israeli citizen, 78 years old. I'm doing the protest for 8.5 years. I got arrested, they beat me, they put me in jail, they stepped on me with the horses. But one thing they cannot do, they cannot stop me of talking against the evil of the Israeli government and the IDF.
So there's one of what? I don't know. According to polls, 10 to 20% of Israelis who have a moral objection to this genocide. And he says he's been protesting for 8.5 years. And look at the experience he recalled: being jailed, being beaten, being roughed up by the cops. Yeah, that's the democracy in the Middle East. We just saw a couple of different pieces of footage of cops just rousting peaceful protesters there. And things are reaching a real tipping point, it seems, in Israel. And this is one of the reasons why I stand by Russ's prediction that the state is just not going to be able to function for much longer, because look at this collapse in confidence from within. We're going to do a piece, I think, tomorrow night where Russ pitched about how, in Israel, there are sort of pockets of communities adopting this sort of like hipster aesthetic Basically adopting the sort of cultural presentation of the kind of Jews who they tend to frown upon in Israel, like the New York kind
the
of
shtetl Jews,
affable shtetl Jews, right? The ghetto Jews. Sometimes they even, the particularly nasty ones, call us Holocaust Jews, right?
Yeah.
Because I think they're starting to see just how terrible things are going to be for Israel long term because of the moral stain that they're not going to be able to rub off. And I think that's why you're starting to see some more Israelis speak out against this, because they understand that the project is doomed. And at a certain point, okay,
going to show up at the draft office and
if you're someone like this who is a conscientious objector and who recognizes it's a genocide, at what point are you just going to leave? Right? At what point do you just decide, you know what, I can't be here anymore? We've seen that a lot where Israelis of conscience end up leaving because they just can't be a part of this anymore. And so, I think as the government of Israel just proves its indifference to the hostages and proves that they are just so fanatical in their imperial ambitions, I think it's going to alienate enough of the population, if not with a sense of, if it doesn't instill a sense of moral outrage in the majority of them, I think it will prove to be unsustainable to a majority of them, at which point a lot of them are just going to leave. There's going to be a massive brain drain. There's going to be a massive resource drain or massive population drain. How could there not be? How could there not be? And so, these protests, it's hard to get too excited about these protests, because when you look at what this country has done with the support of so many of its people, in fact, a great majority of its people just showing indifference at best to the suffering of people in Gaza and in the West Bank, it's tough to look at this and go rah, rah, rah. At the same time, you do have to see it as an indication of the collapse of the state, because the government and the people are just in a certain tension that's just not sustainable. Because through all this, the other thing you have to remember is, because Netanyahu is himself a criminal who was on trial prior to October 7th, facing jail time, expulsion and jail time, he is now beholden to people to his right, which makes it even more difficult for this cohort of Israelis, which is now about half, who want the war to end. It's impossible for them to get a foothold in terms of like actually having a say in the policies of the government. That creates a level of instability that I think is going to be too much for the state to sustain. And that, I think, is the main takeaway of these protests, is you just see the tension boiling over. And what happens when they go through with this plan, as Max tweets out, and all the hostages end up dead after all of this, after all of this protest? I mean, these are the biggest protests we've seen. They're not the only protests. Mm-hmm. They've been protesting for the hostages for the last 2 years because they know Netanyahu is the obstacle to an exchange. So what happens when they end up dead? What happens when all of this proves to be for nothing? I see a collapse coming, a social and political collapse within Israel.
Yeah, this is what Ilan Pape meant when he said there's no such thing as a liberal Israeli. Israel is an inherently illiberal project. And I think for some of these people who want to be both Israeli and humanitarian, they're in denial. In the end, all the decent people who live there are going to have to realize that this was a terrible mistake, that this whole project was a terrible mistake, as most Jews thought it was until after the Holocaust. This is why Zionists, they don't like to talk about this, and certainly some people take this beyond to validate views that we wouldn't endorse. But yeah, man, the Havara Agreement, the Nazis and the Zionists were working together. This is a fact. There are commemorative coins that they minted with the swastika on it. They wanted Jews to see no option in Europe for themselves in order to get them to go to Palestine. They did not want to do that, particularly in Germany, where Jews were pretty assimilated, ironically more assimilated than anywhere else in Europe. This idea that they all set themselves apart with the payas, that was not the case, particularly in Germany. They were very integrated into German society. So how do you get these people to go? Think about it. It's a crackpot scheme. If Israel didn't exist and you just came to a bunch of Jews in New York, yeah, look, we're gonna go build settlements in the desert in the Middle East. What would they tell you? That is how Jews of Europe reacted to Zionists originally. They had to scare the living shit out of them. Now, where I say views we don't endorse, I don't believe they created the Nazis, but I think they saw an opportunity there to get people, a population that didn't like this idea, to go along with it.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And indeed, they went along with it after the Holocaust, but the majority of Jews were originally against it. Now you have decades and decades and decades of brainwashing, not only in the West among the Jewish population, but obviously I know some Israelis, man. I mean, they are deep down the rabbit hole. They have been brainwashed from birth. And really, if you push them, they always give away the game. They start talking about the Native Americans. So you're confessing that this is a genocidal state. But what they will not acknowledge is, okay, well, what we're arguing really, you're talking about, would we give this land back? Okay, well, what if it was like 1850 and you still have a fairly large Native American population to give that land back to? You're arguing that the right thing was for America to do what it did and wipe out the rest.
Right.
That's what you're saying. You're in 1850.
Right.
You're saying, well, we got to wipe out the rest of the Native Americans. You want to get to the point where it's a fait accompli, the way it is in the United States, which is a confession that you endorse genocide. You just want to get through the genocide part so you can get to the other side of it, where you go, yeah, that was bad. That was
there's nothing we could do now. Yeah,
nothing
exactly.
we can do now.
Exactly. I mean, if you go back far enough, you could say that the United States was a terrible idea, right? Because of the human cost of, westernizing this land. And we are at the point now where, fat, cozy white boys like us can just say, well, I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, what's done is done, right? Because logistically, there's no going back. And they are at a phase of this where there could be a reconciliation. There still could be an undoing, just like there was in South Africa. Now, just as in South Africa, that reconciliation process is long and it's difficult, and there's a lot of pain to work through there. But they're at a point where it is still possible if they have the will to do it. But as you mentioned, they don't have the will to do it. They have the will to finish the job and then look back and say, oh, that's too bad. And then 4 or 5 generations down the road, this will all be taught in the history books.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, that's what you get. I tell you, when I went to Australia, it was really remarkable to me because we went to this outdoor classical music concert, and they open it with a Aboriginal ceremony with an Aboriginal like medicine man doing the smoke ceremony with music. That's what they want. They want where they could send some Palestinians to do like a traditional folk dance and show how much they respect their customs.
Exactly.
Please clap.